It is such a pleasure to be joining you right here on the India Development Debate on ET Now. I'm Supriya Shrinate, and tonight we've decided to take a departure from pure polity and pure economics to really put the spotlight to where it should ideally belong. Now listen to these statistics carefully, because this may shock you. About 1 billion people in our country, and that is 100 million more than the voters there are, actually live in a state of water scarcity. Every 8th death in India is attributable to some sort of a pollution. Our rivers are getting dirtier, our air is toxic to breathe. And even then, what we hear in a run-up to elections 2019 is not pollution, is not a right to breathe clean fresh air, is not a right to have access to clean, pure drinking water. What we hear is Chowkidar, Berozgar. What we hear is Mandir. What we hear is Rafale. We do not hear issues that really matter. Issues of pure governance, issues that should ideally matter to voters like you and me, and which is why we decided to put the spotlight to where it should really belong. And it is a pleasure to be introducing my panel right here to you. Mr. Supriya Shrinate is a water conservation expert and founder of the Biome Solutions Rainwater Club. He joins us right here. I'm also joined by Supriya Shrinate, Senior Research Associate in the Center for Science and Environment. Mr. Madhavan Narayanan, senior journalist and political commentator, joins us. And so do Narendra Taneja, who represents the BJP, and Muhammad Khan, who represents the Congress party. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Just for the benefit of this show, if I may request, let's keep it bipartisan, because the air that we breathe has nothing to do with the Congress or the BJP. It pertains to everybody. It pertains to our children at home. It pertains to India at large. The water that some of us don't have access to is an important issue. So let's keep it bipartisan. I also request this panel to keep your answers brief so that I can cover a lot of ground that needs to be covered for a show like this. Madhavan Narayanan, why is environment and water not good politics? I mean, these are issues of everyday living. They impact every human life in this country. And yet, it doesn't seem to resonate in the political class. Why is that so?
It's a very good question, Supriya, and I think the most important way to, the best way to describe this is that India is still living in the realm of growth economics, whereas actually the paradigm has shifted to sustainability worldwide. And India was once bitten, twice shy, because after the 1990 economic crisis that resulted in the reforms of 1991, we've been so obsessed with building infrastructure or fanning high GDP growth that we forget that the growth ke side effects hote hain. There is a big side effect thing. So we are letting the microeconomics get the better of macro social issues in which environment is important. And the irony is that it's also affecting everything to a point where our standard of living is going up, but our quality of life is going down. And this needs to be taken beyond media vine stories into the realm of politics, because everyday life has to be made better. The purpose of economic growth is economic welfare, not choking cities.
Fair point indeed. Give me a minute. I want to go across to Palash Mukherjee and then come back to all of you. And Palash, I'm going to discuss specific issues in just a bit, but to just discuss where we are really, the reason why we're doing this debate. Civil society and NGOs and pressure groups and citizens can play a role in environmental crisis, and they have. And so have our courts and everybody else. And, I'm going to ask that question a little later, that why is it being thrown to the courts and not to the elected governments of the day? But can it be done without the committed backing of our institutions? Can it be done without the blessing of political establishment and political will? And is that why we see this lacking? And do we also see this lacking because environment or pollution or water is essentially a subject of urban debate? Does it not resonate very well in rural areas?
I think you've hit the point right. There is a perspective that these issues affect only a small part of our population, but it's here for all of us to see that that's not true. Increasingly, we are seeing that our cities are growing larger, and like my panelists said before me, it's essentially the focus is on growth rather than sustainability. And my personal belief is that the reason for that is the entire paradigm today is politics and policies of convenience. The moment we are talking about reducing pollution, the moment we are talking about change in lifestyle choices, we are talking about the inconvenient. And that would mean changing the way we lived, cutting down our lifestyles by a considerable amount. Cutting down revenues that the governments get from industries and so on. Now, is that something that is acceptable? Is something that the society needs to ask itself.
Okay, no, absolutely. The society needs to ask itself. And I think as a society, as an electoral class, as voters, we need to ask ourselves lots and lots of questions. Why are we not putting our political class on the mat? Why are we not asking them questions of everyday governance? And we will in just a bit. But I'm going to go across to S. Vishwanath, who's joining us in the phone line before he gets on camera with us. And Mr. Vishwanath, I think the question remains the same, that is environment to urban elite an issue, and which is why it doesn't find space in political manifestos as much as it should. I mean, look at the kind of things that get included in manifestos. We did a Times Now VMR poll yesterday, and out of the 10 top things that will be relevant to elections, drinking water, clean air, not being those issues. So it's also a matter of what we expect of our politicians. Have we as Indians written off our political class to be able to provide for us those very basic things, clean air, clean water?
Well, here's the point. The bad environment and pollution actually affects the poor the most. The urban elite can actually withdraw into bubbles of air conditioning or isolate themselves from bad air through air purifiers and water through water purifiers. So it's really a poor person's issue. The fact is that we haven't got the governance architecture and the institutional framework right for the 21st century challenges we face. And that's because funded, they lack money, they lack human resource power, and there's no political will to change the governance framework.
Okay. No political will to change the governance framework. Now hold that thought, because I'm going to go across to the politicians on the show and ask them basic issues of governance that they should in any case promise to us, but they don't. And by you, I don't mean Mr. Narendra Taneja or Mr. Mohammad Khan. I mean political class at large. Mr. Taneja, 1 billion people in India are living in water scarcity. This number is likely to go up to 5 billion by 2050. Why do you believe environment is not at the center stage? Why do you believe clean air, clean water is not at the center stage of our electoral campaign? Do these issues not matter? And you can't say it is, because it is not. And you and I should agree on this.
Well, it depends. I mean, to many of us, it does. I mean, I'm among those. I'm in politics. I'm in BJP. I'm among those who believe that a right to clean air, right to clean water should actually be made fundamental right. It should be in the Constitution. And I think the political class also needs to realize that first and foremost, the biggest resource we have in the country, what's the biggest resource? Is people. And if the people don't have access to such a basic thing like clean air, then what are we talking about? And also the model of development that we have followed since independence, 1947, nothing to do with BJP, Congress or any party. I'm just being, very non-political here. But the model that we have followed, by now we should realize that this model is not sustainable. I mean, it started from the US and the western part of the Europe, we moved to China, and then we are more or less copying China. We want Mumbai to be like Shanghai, and African countries started copying us, India and China. So that's what's happening. So I think somewhere we need to question. But as far as this is concerned, I give you one example. Look at all the large political parties. I don't want to blame any political party. How many political parties have got dedicated department or cells, as they call it, let's say dedicated to environment? Practically none. And at the same time, look in Europe, they have got green parties. In many places, they are in power in many countries of Western Europe. And green green politics is a big chunk, chunk of politics in many countries, Western Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. But at the same time, when you look at the top most polluted 10 countries in the world, majority of them happen to be in our country, or at least in our part of the world. So I think we should leave politics out. It's more about the people of this country. And I think as we, BJP, we are crowdsourcing our manifesto. But what people say is one thing, but people like Me and many of us are like you, and I'm sure Mohammad Khan, we know what the challenge is. In Delhi, I disagree with my previous panelists who said even rich are breathing the same air. The machine doesn't help. You can bring whatever this thing, but the fact is, you can bring bottle of water, maybe Evian or French or whatever, but when it comes to air, which is the most critical thing, is the same air, whether you're the Prime Minister or you are an ordinary laborer. We are all breathing the same air, and the northern part of the country particularly, air is very contaminated, and we must do something about it.
Okay. Naren Taneja. Okay, Naren Taneja, give me a minute. I'm going to go across to Mohammad Khan and then come back to you in just a bit. Mohammad Khan, there is no denying that there is a need for a green manifesto when political parties are gearing up for elections. And if you ask me as a citizen of this country who expects things from our politicians, I want to hold the two of you responsible to do so if you're not going to do so in 2019. You have to talk about environment. You have to talk about access to clean drinking water. You have to talk about the toxic air that we are breathing in. But not only is it a moral imperative, it is a tactical suave move. But why is it that we don't find the green agenda take center stage? You know, this is a part of our everyday discourse. Everybody on TV channels and newspapers and every informed citizen in this country is talking about it. But why is it that our political class is so abjectly quiet over this?
Okay, so first of all, the Congress party has had a dedicated section in its manifesto for the last 3 general elections. For elections to different states, including to New Delhi, the manifestos contained detailed references to water management, to tree cover conservation, and with regard to waste management. These are issues that we have understood are extremely vital, and we need to grapple with them. The other thing, Supriya, I want to point out, since it's not a political debate per se, I want to draw your attention to who was the original environmentalist Prime Minister, and that was Indira Gandhi. She was truly a leader who was far ahead of her time because 3 examples. She created Project Tiger. She saved Silent Valley. There was a proposal to build a power project in Silent Valley in Kerala. And she vetoed it because she said the ecological costs would be too huge. And today Silent Valley is an example of a modern day ecosystem that is thriving in terms of biodiversity. She, above all, went to Stockholm. You remember the Stockholm Convention, the very first climate change convention? She was the only head of state in the world other than the host to attend that convention. And after that, she came back here and enacted laws for the protection of air and water. She used that international treaty to enforce those laws domestically. We have tried to carry on her legacy. When we were in power in UPA 2, I distinctly remember we worked on the National Green Tribunal, a body that was exclusively tasked with looking into these matters because we saw that the judiciary was over-encumbered. We tried to strengthen the process by which environmental clearances, forest clearances and coastal clearances were given. We were criticized for it. We were told that we had shaved off 2 points from GDP. I remember the Economic Times also did a story on that. We have tried to bring in a balance with regard to tiger conservation. Tiger numbers have gone up. I agree with you that there is a lot more that needs to be done. And that's part of a very wide debate on climate change, common but differentiated responsibility, whether we as developing countries have a right to pollute more or we don't. But you're right, you can't argue about it for too long. Sooner or later, all of us must come together and take action. And I guess we're all on the same page on that. Okay,
right. Okay, just give me a minute, Naren Taneja and Mohammad Khan, and I'll come back to you. Let me just go across to the experts and you know, get some facts out of the way before I come back to you. And you know, there's no point harping on this debate and saying the political class is not doing anything. Why is it not a part of the election manifesto? Let's talk about solutions that we can put on the table, and we hopefully will have our politicians accountable and hear this. You know, if I may start with you, Mr. Mukherjee, the solutions that sometimes get talked about are the need to revamp the National Green Tribunal, the need to have a federal green agency like the US EPA. Are these solutions that you believe can, you know, tackle the growing need you know, the growing need to check in the kind of pollution levels that some of us live under? And will this have political blessing, so to say?
You're right. I think you've come to the right question. Earlier, your question to me was also about institutional and the mechanisms that we have in place. The fact is that India does have institutions that have been autonomous and independent for a long time, and they've been trying to address the pollution problem, the environmental issues for a long time. But over time, the capacity of these institutions to deal with the problem is weakening. and that needs to be addressed. It's not as if inclusion in a political manifesto will by themselves change things. Of course, it will be a commendable move, but going forward, these institutions need to be strengthened. For instance, let me tell you what has happened in the name of creating ease of business. We are talking about clearances and so on a little while earlier, and what has happened to make business more easy is that the environmental clearance given to an industry in several states, including the state of UP, the validity of that clearance has increased from 3 years to 10 years. Now, what this means in actual practice is that these industrial units are audited only once in 10 years. And that essentially gives them a 10-year window to go ahead with their polluting activities. Now, is that what the intention of the move was? That wasn't, and that's down to the lack of the capacity of the institution to monitor it without having to actually physically go. There is now a technology available, there are now so many different kinds of mechanisms that can be set into place, but are our institutions capable enough of implementing these modern day technologies? That is a question. Similarly, when it comes to as the government, there will always be a tussle between different kinds of lobbies, and like we said before, like it was said before, the people that are most vulnerable to pollution are the poor. Now, the poor, by obvious reasons, don't have as strong a lobby as the industrialist does, as the automaker does. Now, where is the autonomous institution that is going to take that into account?
No, we're not just, I think when we talk about pollution, somehow we just veer towards just clean and toxic air. I don't think that's the only point to discuss. I'm just going to keep interspersing air and water together because, those are two important issues. And Mr. Vishwanath, the report that is titled Beneath the Surface, the State of the World Water 2019 says 1 billion people living in water scarcity during at least one part of the year and around 600 million living in areas of high to extreme water stress. Will you help our viewers understand what causes this stress and how grave the situation really is?
Well, let me put it this way. India is completely dependent on groundwater as its primary source of water. 65% of our total water requirement, including agriculture, industrial, urban, and drinking water especially, comes from groundwater. And groundwater tables are collapsing. We draw 250 cubic kilometers every year from the ground and consume it and evapotranspire it. We are the largest consumer, bar none. China and USA, number 2 and number 3, do not come close to us. So therefore, for us, if we do not get groundwater to be sustainable, we are in deep trouble. And look what's happening to groundwater. A, in many parts of India, the groundwater table is collapsing. B, fluoride and arsenic are starting to emerge as geogenic contaminants. About 66 million people drink fluoride contaminated water, about 15 to 18 million people drink arsenic contaminated water. And then there's the domestic sewage pollution, there's the industrial pollution which is impacting groundwater. So it becomes a lethal cocktail that we are dealing with. And we simply do not have the mechanisms to manage groundwater, to regulate it. The institutions are not in place. The pollution control boards, which are supposed to be regulating water pollution, are simply ineffective so far. We need to strengthen up these institutions. We need to bring a policy framework in place for groundwater management, and especially pollution of groundwater is an irreversible process. So we have to deal with that irreversibility very quickly and carefully, beginning right now. Do we have the right governance institutions? No. Do we have the right regulatory institutions? No. It won't help strengthening the NGT or Supreme Court because it will be too late by then. We need interventions right at the beginning.
Okay, you know what, I'm going to come back to you and ask you what should the laundry list be to ensure that, our groundwater does not get as polluted as it does and the irreversibility gets addressed. But Madhav Narayan, a political question there on water, and then of course one air that I'm going to take with the politicians on the show. The political question is sugarcane farming, and one of the reasons why our tables are depleting, many people say, is, again, I'm no expert in this, but this is what my research throws up, is that we are producing crops in different parts of India that have no business to produce those crops because the groundwater tables are going to be depleted as a result. Sugarcane, for instance, is a big guzzler of water. You know, it's again a hugely political sensitive vote bank, both in Maharashtra and UP. You've seen how people have moved away from sugar. You know, the voters have moved away as a class. Again, Kanpur, the big tannery belt, so to say. Can there be a political solution to what is really a problem that rests with a huge political vote bank? And it is imperative to grow the right crops at the right places, which we are not doing. We have no business growing basmati in Punjab. We are doing that, and we're doing that at the cost of our water tables.
Absolutely. I think the important point to remember, Supriya, in this case is that whether it's sugarcane or basmati, there is a tendency to assume that one section of relatively affluent farmers or relatively vocal farmers are politically significant and ignoring the alternatives. So we need a lobby to fight lobby, which means the sustainability needs its own industrial lobby, which could be in the form of various environmental engineering companies or something which gain from this. But the other side of the story is that some of these environmental issues are inextricably linked to inflation-related issues and also procurement price-related issues. So what we need is a holistic package of solutions. I am slightly tempted to digress and go back to what Mohammad Khan said about Indira Gandhi. I said Indira Gandhi's environmental biographer Jairam Ramesh was shunted out of Environment Ministry because he was considered obstructionist. Therefore, we are paying lip service to what happened in the 70s and early 80s without realizing that our obsessions with growth and our obsessions with keeping inflation low has an environmental cost. In fact, I have begun to say that even inflation may be a good thing for the environment if it is in the process of adjusting procurement prices for sustainability. So we need a green first approach to politics in which we shall assume collectively as a country that if it isn't green, it isn't good. Yeah. It's okay to shave off a couple of percentage points of the GDP because this is in the long-term interest of the next generation. Yeah. And I can see that Bollywood has woken up to this. We have Neela Madhav Panda making, Kadvi Hawa. We have Shekhar Kapoor trying to make a film called Pani. Yeah. We had K.A. Abbas who made Do Boon Pani in the 60s. I deliberately want to mention these movies because environmentalism has entered the popular consciousness. It is there in every school today. Right. It's there in media discourse. It is not being translated through proper metrics and catchy slogans in the political debate, and that's the threshold we are standing in today. You know, Madhavan Narayan, just for the benefit of our viewers, I want to point out a study. I tried to look for the latest version. I couldn't find it, so I'm quoting from a 2016 Pew study, which says that 73% of city dwellers and 65% of rural Indians view air pollution as a very big problem, with 47% of people actually willing to forego economic growth for cleaner air. I'm presuming there will be an equally, if not a bigger number for access to clean drinking water as well. Are we obsessed too much about economic growth? And this is a question I have for both politicians on the show. Narendra Taneja, let me begin with you. Is growth just a number to obsess over? Because like Madhavan Narayan and other panelists have said, both Palash Mukherjee and S. Vishwanath, it is a part of our discourse. It is a part of our social discourse. Somehow, it is not moving the needle for our politicians. Which is why I go back to asking, when we talk about development, when we talk about growth, it seems to be a number we are obsessed with. We are the fastest growing economy in the world because we're growing at 7%, 7.5%, and there is going to be so much of tutu meme on all ends of the political spectrum on this. Is growth merely a number to obsess over?
Well, it's a tough question, Supriya, but my sense is we need both. We need growth, we need fast growth, and at the same time, we need green growth. I think that's what it is. And that's precisely what, if you look at Bharatiya Janata Party government, we are trying to do. Look at, for instance, what we have managed. Look at the push we have given to renewable energy. 2014, where was renewable? And look at renewable today. That time, renewable was not in the region of even 3,000 megawatt. Look, we are close to already producing 40,000 from solar alone. Wind is separate. Today, the whole world is talking about India's renewable agenda. And now look at the same time, we have come out with by 2030 electric mobility. Even in Delhi, you won't find petrol diesel cars. So, I mean, this is all announced as part of the policy now. And there are a number of such steps being taken. You see, the important thing here is, you know, that we all need to put our head together, what's going on. But development, yes, people like you and me, many of your viewers, because you are a kind of, in a way, don't feel offended, elite channel. But the point is, those people who are below poverty line, living in far-flung areas, they want to see the same kind of amenities, facilities, lifestyle and everything people like you and me enjoy in Delhi. Now the question here is that we don't need to go the path that, for instance, Scandinavian countries have followed. Since my friend from the Congress talked about Stockholm, you know, conference that time, at that time I was a student in Scandinavia, actually in Stockholm. Now the question is that, you know, we don't need to go that far, that road. We have to strike right balance, you know, somewhere. Let's not forget one thing. Today, look at 90% of India's economy is run on fossil fuels. 90%, petrol, diesel and coal. 67% of electricity that you consume is coming from coal, and coal pollutes, oil pollutes, diesel pollutes, petrol pollutes. Delhi has a population of more 1 crore plus motor vehicles. So now the question is, we need both. The question is, how do we strike the right balance?
Okay.
And look at the BJP government. We have moved in that direction. Electric mobility is in the top of the agenda. But just to conclude, now the point I'm saying is that, you know, what is important is we need to decentralize the whole thing, have senior conversation with big cities and state governments, because this is basically a subject of state governments, mostly. So it's important we involve all stakeholders, the people, the consumers, car manufacturers, car users, and state and the cities, in order to move forward. But we can't really, we don't have the option of going either this way or that way. We have to go the middle path and follow the middle path.
No, I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more that this has to be a collaborative effort. This needs to have all stakeholders involved and take them on board. It can't just be done by the, by the government. It can't just be done by the civil society. It has to have the manufacturers, the automobile makers, and everybody involved. And of course, I'm just referring to air right now. And on water, there will be similar stakeholders as well. But I think the question that I have for Mohammad Khan, and I think ideally it should be answered by both politicians, but let me take it to one. Mohammad, there are things that have been spoken about. A multi-North Indian CM committee headed by the Prime Minister. Reduction in cut crops will perhaps move the needle. Crop residue measures, management efforts. The reality is, has our political discourse become so acrimonious that it has not left space, many fear, for collaborative efforts like this? This is not just a function of the central government. It will perhaps involve some state governments too, in this part of the world, perhaps the north states, in some other parts of the country, some other states, and which is why it has to be a center-state federal sort of a collaboration. My fear is that our politics has become so acrimonious, we may end up finding no solutions to this.
I guess you're right. Things have become acrimonious, and perhaps they are more acrimonious now than they've ever been. But there are a couple of points I want to touch upon that the other panelists have spoken about. First of all, one of the panelists rightly pointed out to the concept of a green GDP. I remember in the year 2009, Mr. Jairam Ramesh was the Environment Minister, and he, in association with the Ministry of Statistics and Planning Implementation, asked Professor Partha Dasgupta to chair a committee to arrive at this green GDP. Because the GDP numbers that we put forth today are bereft of and do not acknowledge the environmental cost or the carbon footprint that goes into making those goods and services that we proudly say contribute to that number of 7 or 8%. That exercise, unfortunately, after the report was submitted in 2013, no steps were taken in furtherance thereof. I think we should pick up where we left off so we have more data. Two, you're absolutely right. One of the biggest movements to emerge in the environmental field, and one of the panelists spoke about awareness, has been the citizens movement. There are more environmental lawyers now than there were 10 years ago. There are more people who are exploring this field, more people who are educated from premier institutions like the Yale School of Forestry, people who work with premier organizations like CSE, TERI, WWF, who are now working in India in a very meticulous fashion. Number three, and that is a reason to rejoice. I think the citizens movements are what will take us into the future. Number three, there has to be political priority. The Ministry of Environment and Forests has always been headed by a Minister of State. As you know, Supriya, a junior minister. It is never given to a minister with a full cabinet rank, and that is something that is worrying. Even Mr. Javadekar, when he held it originally, was an MOS. The budget of the Environment Ministry, if I recall correctly, is somewhere around 2,000 crores. To put that in context, the budget of the Ministry of Rural Development is 1 lakh crores. It is 2% of the rural development budget. Therefore, you do not have the money to train and equip experts regardless of however much you would like to do so. I remember that because we had a big fight on our hands getting the NGT established and getting the money for it from the budget. Finally, it is not a one-dimensional problem. There are multiple facets to it, more than you can imagine. There are 3 silos that it is put in: wildlife, environment, forests, and of course coasts. Every department requires a different category of experts to look into it. It is debates like this, like the one you are having, that actually encourages thought on this and brings it into the discourse of the mainstream agenda. And I think that is also a good step. But if I have a silver bullet solution, I wouldn't be able to share it with you because honestly I don't know. But for each one of these, there are many great and talented people doing amazing research and work, and those are the people the government should go out, pull into its team and say, now you guys go and make the system better.
No denying that at all. But if I may go across to Mr. Mukherjee, and I'm just going to stick with air pollution for just a minute more. And to be fair, there has been a lot of chatter about electric vehicle moving to 2030, which is encouraging to hear. But what is disappointing to notice is that not enough effort has been made to make that switch. It's good that, electric vehicle 2030, mission 2030 is a good thing to talk about, and I'm glad that is out in the public domain. But has enough effort been made? Has enough ecosystem been created? Is there any incentive to move to electric, at least in choked cities like Delhi and the NCR region? So that's one question. And the second question is there also lack of data that needs to be blamed for holding back real big policy political action? I mean, Delhi has 38 continuous air quality monitors. And please hold your breath. Delhi has 38. The rest of India, all of it, has 99 centers. So where is the data to monitor the quality of air that we are breathing in? And like Mohammed Khan said, the budgets of 2 different ministries, the Environment Ministry versus Rural Development, again, not to take away nothing from that, is a glaring example of how less we care about the environment.
I think you've asked the right questions here. The first point you raised was about electric vehicles. So I'd say that electric vehicles is being increasingly seen as something that all the stakeholders are keen on: the consumer, the automobile industry. They're reluctant in some places, yes. But I'd like to just put across one point here, that simply a move from your current petrol or diesel driven cars to electric cars is not going to be a silver bullet solution. It's not going to solve the problem of congestion. It's not going to solve our urban problems that we have, and pollution is going to continue. What we need is a paradigm shift away from personal mobility towards a mode where we are depending more and more on shared mobility. Just to put that in perspective, any car that you have, any car that a person owns, for more than 95% of its life is parked. So that is a sheer waste of space and resources which are scarce in our cities and are becoming more so going forward. So electric mobility, although the focus has now has increasingly come on a move towards electric vehicles away from our personal diesel and petrol driven vehicles, we need to combine this with other things like compact cities, with greater usage of cycles, with the infrastructure for NMT, non-motorized transport, for better pavements, for better public transport, more deployment of buses. Metros may not be a solution always, but road-based solutions are an essential part of our mobility solutions. If you look at the BRT concept, it has worked successfully in several cities, but in Delhi it failed miserably because of the attitude that most people had towards it. First point. The second point that you raised was the lack of availability of data, and I think you've hit the point again right on its head there. Although the situation has changed in the last couple of years, in the last decade I would say, and you're seeing the effect of that right now. I mean, why is it that the top 10 list of top 10 most polluted cities is dominated by Indian cities now, and it wasn't the case 10 years ago? Because 10 years ago we weren't monitoring in those places, and now for the first time we have the data from those cities, from the smaller cities, from the tier 2, tier 3 towns and cities of India as well. And even there is a huge lacuna. Like you said, real-time monitoring stations, Delhi has close to 30-40% of the country's real-time monitoring stations, and that is the level of distribution that we need to aspire for. The same thing when we come to other kinds of pollution, when we come to water, when we come to solid waste. Very often the parameters that are measured by the government are not the right parameters. When you're looking at a lot of cleanliness surveys and a lot of smart city initiatives that that have been rolled out in the past couple of years, the parameters that are chosen for implementation and for studying are not what is reflective of the situation on the ground. When you call a city clean, what does it mean that the waste generated is tucked away in a pile far away from the city? Does that make the city clean? But what is it doing to the surroundings? So these are questions that we need to ask about why is the data not there and what is the kind of data that we particularly need to look at.
No, fair point indeed, and I think the bit about segregating waste and all of that is important and you know must be discussed as well. But if I may take another question on water with Mr. Vishwanath, and I think you know one of the things that's being reported is that India's rate of groundwater depletion has increased by 23% between 2000 and 2010. India accounts for almost 1/4 of the total groundwater extracted globally, which is actually more than US and China combined. Now help me understand, you did help the viewers understand how grave the situation was. Help me understand what are the remedial measures that can be put in place. I mean, of course, awareness and creating awareness is all just one of them, but what are the remedial measures that can be put in place from a political point of view to which we should hold our politicians responsible, which should be a part of the political manifestos?
Well, the thing of the matter with groundwater is that we are drawing more than what's being recharged. So demand management is crucial. We must reduce our extraction of groundwater to what is annually replenishable. That's the fundamental first point. The second is we have to take a call on how efficiently we are using this groundwater and get a heck of a lot more efficient with it. You pointed out already sugarcane growing, and sugarcane growing in areas which are fed with groundwater is unthinkable in semi-arid areas. So we need to take a look at the cropping pattern which is being fed by groundwater itself and then try to remediate that. We need to talk about soil conservation and increasing organic carbon in soil so that the moisture retentivity of the soil is increased and therefore the demand for groundwater lessens in those areas which are fertilized or irrigated by groundwater. We need to do that. And we need special focus on areas where there's fluoride and arsenic contamination to make sure that there's enough remediation of groundwater itself by raising the groundwater table, then treating it so that groundwater is free from that pollution. And ultimately, we'll have to take a river basin approach. So far, we've been intervening in piecemeal. We have to look at mapping a river basin. We have to look at mapping aquifers, understanding how these aquifers behave, which is a process which has just now been set in motion by the central government through the Atal Bhujal Yojana. We need to do that understanding and mapping of sub-aquifers and look at drawing up plans for each sub-aquifer so that they become sustainable. And that sustainability will come from demand management and supply augmentation through recharge. Finally, we have to take a look at the institutions again. I'd step back for the air pollution point of view. See, most of the air pollution in the city can be thought through if an UMTA, an Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, is set up, which puts before the citizens the data in a transparent fashion. What is the modal split? How do we want to go about managing transport, whether through public vehicles or through private vehicles and so on and so forth. Similarly, with the Pollution Control Board, we need more data and transparency on surface water, lake water and groundwater status. What is the standard of, what is the quality of our groundwater? What is the quantity that we are drawing? We have absolutely no clue on that one. None of the borewells in India, 33 million of them, are metered. All our guesstimates of groundwater extraction are just waving a finger in the air. You know? So we need to get our institutions and their act together very quickly at that. The groundwater authority is completely underfunded and understaffed in most states. We need to get their act together. We need to set up legislation on groundwater. We need to set up monitoring and data and transparency and draw plans on sustainable groundwater management.
Okay. Okay. No, fair point indeed. And I think, you know, your point about those borewells being unmetered is such a relevant point there. But Madhav Narayanan, you know, we keep criticizing and we keep comparing ourselves to China all the time. I just want to point out some data for the benefit of our viewers. Until a few years ago, Beijing was actually more polluted than the city we live in, which is Delhi. Satellite data between 2010 and 2015, not so long back, shows a 17% decline in fine particle material over China. The same data shows a 13% increase over India. We may hate China and we may call their bluff all the time, but what are the lessons we can learn from them?
I think the key point, the key lesson is that we shouldn't be showing the same time lag that China is showing. Just as we leapfrogged to mobile phones and telephony, why not leapfrog in environmental issues also? Because there will always be a lag between growth economics and sustainability using conventional thinking. We have to start thinking unconventionally. In fact, it breaks my heart to see people like Vishwanath and Palash Mukherjee, because we have great expertise in this country. We do not need more expertise. What we need are actionable programs with sloganable politics, in which instead of paying lip service to everything from growth to green, we have to recognize the trade-offs. For instance, in mainstream economics, we know there is a trade-off between inflation and interest rates. So you can't have low inflation, and there is a certain trade-off in understanding the cycles. We need a trade-off management. We need to sloganize. We need something like the human development indicator needs to be developed for environmental indicators, so that the slogans and data needs to be thrown at politicians so that they put it in the manifesto. I agree that we need more funds for environmental management, but what we don't need, I used to know Anil Agarwal personally, who could call him as a father of modern environmentalism in India.
Right.
From there to people like Palash and Vishwanath, I really salute all of them. I have to apologize and say we need people who will convert your thoughts into policy action and slogans in politics. I have to mention Tamil Nadu now. Without mentioning Sterlite and the new awakening in Tamil Nadu,
right,
we are not getting anywhere. It's very strange, but the extreme fringe of Tamil politics is now becoming very environment friendly. The irony is that they are kissing, or they are almost flirting with separatism at one level, but another level raising very progressive issues on how to use water, how to keep the air free, how to keep ordinary people free. You know, Tamil Nadu has taken the lead, whether you see the Kudankulam protests or Sterlite protests. They are seen as obstructionists, but the truth lies somewhere in between, where the pollution control authorities have been not only found wanting, they've been almost, negligent in some ways. We need to bring all that into the mainstream political discourse and make sure that we get a constructive sort of actionable document. You know, we are not getting anywhere with more committees in the government or more NGOs, I can tell you that.
No, absolutely. NGOs and the government committees may not help, but I think we need to keep putting pressure on our politicians. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'll give the closing question to Mr. Naren Taneja. You represent the ruling benches here. You're seeking a re-election, sir. I agree the Prime Minister has spoken about environmental issues. I agree that Swachh Bharat has a certain resonance to it, and, there is a certain success that one hears of. But, the record as far as Ganga cleaning, again, a little disputable. You could have done a lot more. I understand the bureaucracy works in a certain way, you couldn't. But how are you going to assure our viewers that environment is going to be the priority as far as the Bharatiya Janata Party in 2019 is concerned?
Well, you see, Supriya, I mean, to be very honest with you, you just have to look at our work. I'm not here to really start counting you, but look at, for instance, our energy policy. World over, the conclusion is very simple. Energy policy is your climate policy, and climate policy is energy policy. And look, all that we have, how we have managed to completely recast India's energy policy. For instance, we have taken the decision, no more coal-fired power plants. India's, except for the one which are already under construction, we have decided to say no to that. And number of coal-fired power plants which we have shut down, and the push that we have given to renewable energy. And look at the, for instance, forest cover. Last 2 years only, forest cover has gone up by 1%. 1% is a lot. And the commitment that we have given to the global community in terms of cutting carbon emissions, and the list just goes on. And but you would appreciate for matters like this, 5 years is a very, 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 very short time. And my friend here talked about Mr. Anil Agarwal. Yes, he is, but at the policy level. At the policy level, the father of when it comes to environment movement actually is Dr. Digvijay Singh, who was India's first environment minister under Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and he's Maharaja Wankaner from Gujarat, the man who was so passionate, and he's also the founder of Ministry of Environment here at the center, and he's the one who started the whole thing together with Mrs. Indira Gandhi. We have to give due credit to whether you belong to Congress. And the fact is this was Dr. Digvijay Singh. Now the point I'm trying to make is very simple. We have to look at policy issues, and policy issue we have to address both environment / climate change and energy at the same time. And by the way, China, I was in China just 10 days ago speaking on climate change in China, and I delivered the keynote address. I think we cannot compare ourselves with Beijing and all that because the kind of things, it's a completely different political system. So there is nothing for us to learn from them. I'm sorry to say that, except that we should incentivize, some manufacturing in solar and so on and so forth. Just but last point I want to make is, what is important is at the policy level, political level, we need to do with the maximum possible. But at the same time, in matters like this, if you go by the global experience, it is both top down and bottom up. People also have to be very alert.
Right.
And demand.
Okay. Oh, yes, absolutely. And that is where I think I'm going to end my show. Yes, that is where I'm going to end my show, because I think as responsible Indians, let us not just vote for issues that keep figuring. It is important that we take our government into, to task. We must question them on jobs. We must question them on rural stress. We must ask the Congress of what their agenda and what their promises are. But I think at the end of the day, it has all to boil down to issues that we have to deal as citizens on an everyday basis. And guess what? There is no issue greater than one that touches every Indian, which is clean air and access to clean drinking water. And on that, our vote should be non-negotiable. And that is what is going to pressurize and make politicians take stock and act. Thanks very, very much, Mr. Mukherjee, Mr. Vishwanath, Madhavan Narayanan, Naren Taneja and Mohammad Khan for being with us in this edition of the India Development Debate. We take a quick breather. There's so much more that's coming up right here on 18 Now.